Hi, Zizaran here with another video, and this is a collab with Captain Lance for a Vaal Cold Snap, and it is a Templar. Lance, tell me a little bit about this build. What is it? How does it work?
So the core idea is all built around the Vaal skill benefits from the Architect of Chaos, Forbidden Secrets giving us a Shepherd of Souls keystone, which allows us to have 80% less soul cost, with a downside of having increased cost every time we cast another Vaal skill within 8 seconds. But with Vaal Cold Snap being a duration skill, we can extend its duration beyond 8 seconds, proc it once, let it go for 8 seconds as we run around shield charging the map, kind of like a pseudo cold Righteous Fire feeling. And then once those 8 seconds are up with the skill, we can cast it again without the downside of the increased costs, which allows us to effectively have 1/5 of the soul cost, which makes it way more maintainable for use cases in a row. And we follow that up with the Fever of Corruption Ascendancy node in the class, which gives another 50% reduced cost, which would technically give us 10 casts if the game didn't round, but the game does round up from a 35 soul cost going to 3.5 rounds to 4 costs per use, which then makes it 8 casts in a row. So what happens is you kill the first pack in the map, you generate your souls, and then you can use Vaal Cold Snap about 8 times in a row, which is about 60 seconds. That is enough to clear most maps, but if you need more time, like say it's a longer map or you had to backtrack or whatever, you just kill another pack, generate your souls again, and go for another 60 seconds. Late
Wow.
game of the character, you can include something like a Soul Ripper to then not have to even kill another pack and just pop that and go again. But that's kind of the core idea of the build.
And guys, obviously we don't have a video of the build in use because these ascendancies don't exist yet. So this is for the Phrecia event, and we are getting 19 new ascendancies, and they will be staying afterwards as a private league modifier. I'll show Path of Building here, and Lance has put a lot of effort in. If you don't know how Path of Building works, it's a third-party program. I have a full video on how it works, and Lance has put in like a step-by-step thing here. It goes you through all the ascendancies and stuff like that. Well, technically, the ascendancies are a jewel in Architect of Chaos. So what is the ascendancy order here, since it's not in PoB like normal?
For starting off, I'm going to recommend actually starting as the Polytheist class because it has a node called Aberrath's Hooves.
Mhm.
This is specifically because Cold Dot isn't really that good early leveling. I will have recommendations for Fire caster leveling, which is just kind of one of the meta ways to level builds, and it'll just have you having a better time. You'll get to that first collab, you get Aberrath's Hooves. It should be a large amount of flat damage, and you can effectively cruise around just walking where your steps are killing monsters as your initial leveling part until Cruel Lab. And then when we swap over to Cruel Lab, I'm going to recommend when you swap back, you can use gold respecs on the Ascendancy points or 10 respec passes, which you should have at that point. And you want to respec back to Architect Chaos. The way you do it is you respec out of the points on your Polytheist Ascendancy, and then you click the offering thing at the end of the lab after you've killed the Zaro. And that'll allow you the choice to then click Architect of Chaos, and you'll go for Forbidden Secrets, which is the Everlasting Sacrifice, Shepherd of Souls keystone one, then Fever of Corruption. These two allow the Vaal Cold Snap to really basically synergize, where you get that duration scaling and the ability to chain them together. And then after that in Merc Lab, you'll go for Chaos Reigns for the +3. This will apply to both your Cold Snap and your Vaal Cold Snap for scaling your damage. And later on, when you get your Uber Lab, if you have been able to corrupt some gear pieces, I'd recommend Glimpse of Chaos for the life scaling. But if you haven't, you can start out with Impure Blood, which should solve a lot of your mana sustain issues until you can get some more corrupted items, in which case you will swap over to Glimpse of Chaos in the late game.
And a quick note on the Glimpse of Chaos, this is actually being buffed, so even though it says -4 here, this is actually -2 to all resist for each corrupted item, so it is even stronger than anticipated. In the skills here, we're going to be adding a skill set for leveling, but like Lan said, a lot of the early leveling, it's just going to be you walking all over your enemies, and that Ascendancy node, it's not like in PoE2 where it is socketable or supportable. It is just on its own, which is why it's going to be so strong early. I think normally the game is at level 7 we have normally on the boots, and with supports like that can already take you to maps. So level 20 Aberrath's Hooves should be enough to get to maps really on its own, but obviously we're swapping pretty early. There you have basic Cold Snap skills here for like the early setup, and then you have the Wrathpith skills here for the later setup. So here you have with Awakened Gems and stuff like that. You can see you get like 4 million DPS with this and a very, very strong tank. Lance has made 2 different item sets here. So in the early game, it's basically just getting resist, movement speed. Like you can see there's some notes on the items here. Very, very simple gear. And if you, obviously you can just use rares in all these other spots as well. But if you're softcore trade especially, a lot of these items should be pretty okay to pick up. They're not super rare. Obviously a lot of people might be playing similar things early, so they might be a little bit fluctuating in price. But Rhyme Gaze, Clum's Heart, Vaal are all pretty farmable and not crazy expensive items. In the Enyim year, you have like Wrathpith, which will probably be fairly expensive, I should assume. Annihilation's Approach. And then you have some Enyim things to chase down, like the Watcher's Eye, Light of Meaning, and a Glorious Vanity of Xibaqua.
So the big thing about Xibaqua, the real interesting part about this Ascendancy that I didn't go over yet is Everlasting Sacrifice. This Ascendancy point says, if your energy shield reaches full, it'll sacrifice your energy shield and then give you 5 max all res. Not just 5 Ellie, but 5 chaos as well. And the cool thing here is this synergizes great with Xibaqua because Divine Flush has a line that says all damage bypasses ES. If you don't take any damage to your energy shield, you actually never have your recharge turned off. And recharge has a base rate of 33% per second, meaning it will go to full in 3 seconds. So the cool combination here is if you have Xibaqua, damage just never hits your ES. It will keep going to full within 3 seconds as long as you have just a little bit of ES, and it'll sacrifice itself and give you that 5 max all res. So you'll end up getting 5 max Ellie res, that 5 max chaos res from Everlasting Sacrifice, and then with Xibaqua, you'll get 5 max chaos again, getting you a baseline of 80 Ellie res and 85 chaos res, which combines really well with a bit more max res scaling. It protects you from things like penetration, like Shaper Balls, and ends up being a pretty nice defensive layer.
Yeah, and we can see here in the like Ellie hits are very strong, and the Fizz max hit is very strong as well. So, Lance, I see that we're using Annihilation's Approach and Wrathpith. How do we deal with the incoming damage?
So the incoming damage from Wrathpith is based on how often you use your skills. And this skill being a skill we're only casting once every 8 seconds isn't too big of a deal. It's a sacrifice of 10% when we basically do a Frost Blink or when we cast our Cold Snap, Vaal Cold Snap. And we are countering that with a bunch of regen. You'll notice we have tattoos for regen all over our tree, as well as we've forced in a lot of regen throughout our Ascendancy. And that combined with the max res scaling also counters the degen from Annihilation's Approach and Righteous Fire. You'll see in late game we have a character that's around 14,000 HP with 5k regen. That's a ton of regen. But then with the degens from Annihilation's Approach and Righteous Fire, we end up still with a net 3k life regen, thanks to investing heavily into quite a lot of regen stats on our tree.
Wow, that's really high regen, actually. This can be fun.
Yeah, it should feel pretty good. I really like high regen characters.
Yeah, it feels so
I
good.
hate degens so much, and having a good regen character just feels so nice.
Yeah, it's why my EA champion ends up with like 800 regen. It's like so awful to play a champion with no regen. Next up, Lance also put a lot of stuff into the notes. And there's a very big chance Lance is going to be playing this himself. He was talking about he was either going Starfcaster or this. So if he's playing this, you'll be able to go to Lance's live stream, ask him questions, and he'll be able to help you. And he'll probably be pretty far ahead, so you'll be able to see how it turned out. So Lance, what about Bandits and the Gods?
So for Bandits, we're going to go with helping Alira. This just is for me a feels good situation where I don't have to try as hard to cap my res. Ultimately, if you're good at managing your gear, you can go for a passive point right away. My personal preference is going for the res early, not having too much of an issue with it. And then later on, when your gear gets better and you see that you're pretty overcapped on each of your resistances, you can respec this for a passive point. As for the Pantheons, I personally have a big preference towards Ralakesh. I notice playing this game, I usually die to things that are bleed, shock, and freeze. And Ralakesh just solves the bleed one for me. It's been a great thing ever since I started using that. And then for Major God, I prefer Brine King for freeze and chill reduction, as well as swapping to Solaris later on when you can get some sort of immunities from things like your Annihilation's Approach, which gives you freeze and chill immunity. But initially, when you don't have those immunities, I'd recommend Brine King, obviously swapping to Solaris later when you get the immunities.
That is the Architect of Chaos build guide for the upcoming event on Thursday. Starts tomorrow. Hope you guys all have a blast. Make sure you check out Captain Lance. Amazing creator. Always does really cool shit. And just a really good guy in general. So make sure you check him out. Throw him a follow. Give him some support. And always will have good builds for you. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed these collabs. Thank you for watching. Sub if you liked the video. But more importantly, try to die less than I do.